right. Welcome. My name is Patrick Rooney. I am the founder of oldschoolus.com. And we are all about natural health, success, and freedom. We've always been about that. I've always pretty much been about that. And I've always been an old school dude. That's the way I was raised. And that's the way I pretty much think. But I want to be an old school man with a new school idea of always going somewhere, moving forward. We can't be old school people who are stuck in the La Brea tar pits here. We always need to move forward. If you don't grow, you die. And I'm all about moving forward. Today, we're going to do a special show called Rebuilding the Tribe. So I think this is going to be an interesting one because the question is, first of all, what is the tribe and why are we, did I say rebuilding the tribe? I meant building the tribe, because in a certain way, the tribe hasn't been built. At least today's tribe hasn't been built, I think, the way it should be. So I'm going to bring on a couple of friends of mine who are we're going to hash this out a little bit. And they've both been working in that direction of building the tribe. And hopefully we have a good conversation today. Here we go. All right, my friend Brian J. Pombo of brianjpombo.com and David Cracchiolo with the very common name, Cracchiolo. These guys have been friends of mine for a long time, good friends of mine, and they have a lot to say, and they're doing things in their life. And I'm starting to do more and more in my life. And the idea is that we do things, do the right things, and show other people how they can do the things. So I'm going to give each of you a little bit just to introduce yourselves to everybody else. And we'll start with Brian. Go ahead, Brian.
Okay. I am a business and real estate investor, and which basically means that I build, grow, start, and sell businesses as well as real estate. And along with that, I'm hail here out of Grants Pass, Oregon, in Southern Oregon, with my wife and 3 kids.
Cool. Very good. David C.
Yes, I'm a longshoreman, which means I haul cargo containers all around the docks of the Los Angeles and Long Beach harbor, unload the ships, move cargo. Wonderful job, wonderful union, wonderful benefits.
Yeah.
It's a really a great job being out there on the water with the pelicans and the sea lions and alongside these giant ships and giant cranes. And this is what I've been doing now for many years.
Cool.
I've done other things before, but that's what I'm doing for a living currently. And then in the meantime, working on some hobbies and doing a lot of medical research, working on organic gardening, and a few other things that are in line with sort of building, or maybe we could say rebuilding the tribe.
Yeah, good. Thank you, David. Very good. David is also a certifiable genius. I don't know if certifiable sounds like you're going to the mental ward, but I don't know. But he's a very smart dude, and he has like a photographic memory. It's really amazing when you talk to David. He remembers movies from decades ago, and he'll give you the whole dialogue, like word for word, pretty much. It's really incredible. So he is using his talents for the betterment of mankind. We're hoping for. No, he is. I know.
We're praying for.
Yeah, we are praying for. He has a good heart, so I know you're doing that. And Brian as well. Brian's a great dude, and
not so smart.
No, very smart man. Very smart man. He's very humble, is what he is. Guys, we are going to talk today about building the tribe. So we just I've been having conversations with David for a long time about this, and somewhat with Brian too. And they're both kind of working in this direction. I'm working in this direction now. And I think we get to a certain part of our life where life isn't just about us anymore, is it? It's about, we see ourselves in a very perilous situation in our country and the world in general, and we want to, I think at some point, offer what we can. Brian, you talked about that we all have something different to add. God made us all a little bit different, and we all have natural talents and abilities, and we have our weak spots and we have our strong spots. And the idea, I think, and I never thought this way before too much, and that's what brings us to where we're at now. I think the idea is to build a team of some kind. One person's not enough. As you said, I think before, Brian, we need each other, right?
Mm-hmm.
So where are we going to start here? What is it? What does that mean to you guys? What is a tribe, and what kind of tribe should we be building here? Who wants to go first?
We want to build a tribe. Basically, we want to sort of reclaim a lot of what was lost with this modern industrial society that we have. A lot of the cultural richness was stripped away. And we used to have what I would call intact extended families. And in fact, structures that went beyond the extended family, you could call them tribes for that matter.
Mm-hmm.
And this has largely been destroyed, and people don't even have nuclear families that are functional anymore.
Yeah.
And they're not even functional as independent adults. The level of dissolution has been pretty drastic. But it's not just the fact that people get divorced so readily now. It used to be that you automatically had a trade. You do whatever your father did. Your family had businesses, so you would work in those businesses. This was just viewed as common sense. No one questioned it. You could ask great philosophical questions. Why would you question, what am I going to do for a living? It's already been arranged. And you could always do something else, perhaps.
Mm-hmm.
But your base living was kind of like set. Marriages were largely arranged, or at least courtship was at least supported and facilitated and guided, which is a lot better than I could say how things are now. People were trained for functionality from the time they were young. And this has fallen apart. Our concept of education is degenerated into some form of state-sanctioned babysitting. And all the faculties, the higher faculties that would allow people to run businesses, live independently, even pay their basic bills, have been co-opted by the state. And so you have a bunch of dysfunctional adults. They don't even have basic social graces like how to greet people or how to deal with social encounters, let alone how to run a business. So we need to reverse this, and we need to reclaim much of what was lost, and maybe even go beyond just reclaiming what was lost. Get back to functional extended families, functional tribes.
Right. And you're not talking about things that haven't been done. Of course, you're talking about the past of what's been done, but also there are current groups that tend to do this. The Jewish community, for one. I have a lot of Armenian friends. They tend to, and I was just talking with an Armenian friend today, Arman, good friend of mine, and he was telling me, well, our Armenians kind of developed this because of where they live. They live amongst a lot of hostile countries and things. They had a genocide, the Turks against them. A ways back, there was a serious genocide, which I don't know if the Turks ever admitted to, but that's a whole nother question. But they're very similar to the Jews in a sense, because the Jews have been attacked, over the years, and they've kind of had to build a tribe. And so there are examples of these tribes. And there's other tribes, and maybe the general Christian community. You go to a church and you have they have things people can do together and so forth, but it's not quite probably as strong. And but I think for a lot of us, we've kind of fallen into a certain other kind of way that we're not maybe part of the general community in some way, that we've kind of fallen in a spot where, for whatever reason, we haven't thought to build our own kind of tribe. Brian, what do you think of this so far?
Yeah, well, I couldn't agree more. I think a lot of it comes from the type of person that you're dealing with, because I think you have two extremes. I think there's a fear of joining in with other people, because a lot of people will fear being co-opted by the group,
Right.
or by groupthink, or by a religion in the bad sense of what religion could be, you know,
Or someone told them
politics or something, someone told them
not to join, right?
not to
Don't join a
join and
group.
be your own person and
Right,
everything
right,
else,
right.
and don't join it. And that's, I mean, there's legitimate reasons why you wouldn't want to lose your identity and who you are
Of course.
to any form of group, whatever that group may be. But then there's so you have people that end up getting closed in, and it tends to be people that are a little bit more independent thinking, tend to be people who are a little, maybe they've been turned off by groups in the past because of belonging here or there and having a bad experience.
Yeah.
But then you get to the other extreme, to where a person, those are the two extremes. The person who becomes a hermit versus the person that can't exist without a group. So I think we have to be able to push both those extremes aside and realize that we do need each other in society to some extent. You see this a lot with, if you want to take an independent minded person that goes into the direction of, say, emergency prep or survivalism, they can oftentimes close themselves off from everybody else besides your gun dealer or who supplies you ammo, and just hold up, with your gun and just point it outward and distrust everyone initially. That is a very common thing that a person falls into. But if you go out and you start trying to homestead on your own and try and make yourself completely independent from the world, you'll find out really quick you can't do it all. You can't grow every single item you need for optimal nutrition. You can't mine and develop the bullets that you need and everything else. You can't have the fullest life possible. You could survive, but you can't have the fullest life possible and grow and create a better life without other people.
Yeah, that's right. And the Amish community is a good example of, or Mormons in general. I have Mormon friends.
Yep.
They're really great at the survivalist game because they do it as a community. Amish has Amish community. It almost goes together. The two words kind of are not inseparable in a way. And unfortunately, I don't want to dwell too much on why the heck haven't a lot of the rest of us gotten the clue of what people have been doing for thousands of years. But for whatever reason, David likes to go off on the Henry David Thoreau philosophy of going off to the woods. And I love that stuff, by the way. I love reading. I think we all love those books. Love reading Walden. Was it Walden Pond or Walden?
Yeah.
It's called.
Walden,
and love that stuff, the Ralph Waldo Emerson stuff. And it sounds good. A lot of it is good. But anything to an extreme. By the way, Henry David Thoreau, I don't think he went any further than a few miles up the road from where his house was. It's not like he went into the wilds, right?
Yeah, well, let me tell you about Henry David Thoreau, because this illustrates a point. Henry David Thoreau was an employee of Ralph Waldo Emerson. Ralph Waldo Emerson paid Henry David Thoreau. And Henry David Thoreau, I think, tutored his employer's children, and he did some other things. Okay, but basically, Henry David Thoreau died of I think it was tuberculosis or some lung problem at a fairly early age.
I think about 43 or so.
Yes, and it was probably as a result of living at Walden Pond in that little cabin, trying to live independently, trying to live deliberately, and trying to be a minimalist. And he wrote in his book that if you read his book, he talked about how it took exactly 2 minutes to sweep out the entire cabin. And he
not very big.
Yeah. And I've always contended that this country's philosophy was maybe a little too influenced by Henry David Thoreau, in that there was too much of a independent, I don't need this, I don't need that streak. And, what we need to do is have it counterbalanced by an appreciation of how much we need a community, we need each other, and we need to work together cooperatively and not go out in the woods with say like Jeremiah Johnson with the flintlock rifle and figure you're going to trap beaver. Even he needed a trading post to provide him with his powder and his lead and, some supplies.
I almost watched that movie last night. It was on, and I went back and I couldn't find it. So I actually watched it. It was a couple nights ago. I watched Hoosiers, which was great, but that's a whole other story.
There needs to be a healthy balance here. There needs to be a healthy balance.
Yes. All right. So, a lot of us have got this idea of individualism, rugged, as they call it, rugged individualism. We got this idea we don't want to be in a group. We got this idea that the still small voice tells us all what we need to do, which I believe. I'm not knocking that. I totally believe in that. But the still small voice often tells us to get some help, right? It doesn't just say go to the woods and make sure that nobody helps you and pull yourself up by your bootstraps out in the woods.
I think everything has its place.
Yeah.
And everything starts with a foundation of self-reliance.
Yes.
Everything starts with getting your stuff together before, not completely, your whole life is getting your stuff together, but getting your stuff together enough that you can survive and subsist, and then going beyond that and giving to the world, and you'll get more back, and growing with other people instead of needing other people, instead of getting your identity from other people.
I do believe that's a natural thing that we are born with, and we kind of know. Kids know that. Kids don't run off and play by themselves, do they? They play with others and they have fun and they enjoy their lives. There's actually a lot we can learn from them. There's also before we get too deep into maybe what we should be learning, I don't want to just brush aside the spiritual part as well, but I think this also kind of fits in too. In the spiritual sense, which I think any of us would agree is the most important thing. Many of us are Christians and we believe in an afterlife, and we believe the afterlife is more important than this life even, because that's the one you end up in forever. So what about the angle seems to be that we can go into a weird zone in the spiritual way too. In other words, we can become very self-reliant spiritually, right? We don't need a group. We don't need a church. By the way, Jesus taught in the synagogue every Sabbath, right? Paul taught in the synagogue every Sabbath, or most Sabbath, I think every Sabbath. So this idea that we don't need a physical church and we're just the living embodiment of the temple, which I get that side of it. I really think we've lost a lot by not having healthy physical churches. We get together. It's like anything else, like the Marine buddies or whatever. You get together with these people, you interact with them. You don't go too far off on your own. It kind of keeps you balanced a little bit, keeps you accountable to other people. And also there are things that you do at a church. You don't just talk about spiritual things, which is very important, but you also talk about social things and practical things. And you get kids to get together and you get adults to get together. So I just kind of wanted to throw that thing in about the church, because a lot of people are, oh, I don't need to go to church. I've been like that. I don't regularly go to church. I fully admit that. But I think in a way there's something wrong with that.
Well, I'd like to say that, at a church, what issues do we have in life? You have an employee in your business. They don't seem to be getting it. You really don't want to fire them. You want to sort of help them out, but it's hurting your business because they're screwing stuff up. Okay. Mm-hmm. So maybe you can go to church and get some feedback from some of your fellow parishioners, some of whom may also have businesses and they've encountered the same kind of problem, and they can give you a good idea of exactly what point you should fire the derelict employee, or and maybe before that you can try to provide them with some kind of support that could help them do their job better.
Right.
Where is the balance? Your fellow man helps you arrive at these distinctions so that you could function in a godly way, as opposed to just trying to figure it all out in your head or rely upon intuition. If you don't have it, then you are trying to learn everything through trial and error with a whole bunch of broken fingers in the process.
Yeah. And your fellow man at church, sometimes there are people at church who have businesses, or there's other people at church who need a job,
Yes,
or
yes.
etc. There's a matching process that can easily go on with people that you know and trust to some, at least some degree. Most of the time, people going to your church, there's a certain amount, at least a low barrier of trust that they've now got into. That's part of a tribe. So a tribe, there's usually a little bit of a barrier to getting into a tribe, not necessarily a huge one. On the internet, you got internet tribes, but in real life, there's a little bit of a barrier, right? But you can help each other naturally, and churches do that, and they have been doing that for a long time. And those who don't get associated with other people find themselves isolated.
Every Mormon church has a labor pool of young people who are part of that pool, who are ready to go to work for whatever business the other members of that church have, and they could call that church, that labor pool, and see what young people that weekend or whatever could come and help them with their store, their construction site, their landscape business, whatever it is.
Yes.
And
Brian, do you want to talk about the role of church at all?
Yeah. The way I like to think about it is that there's an old movie from the 40s called The Razor's Edge, based on the Somerset Maugham book. It's a great movie if you haven't seen it. It's weird. It's an awkward movie, but it's got some really interesting lessons in it.
And Bill Murray was in a version of that came out later.
Yeah, in the early 80s, Bill Murray made a version, which I've never even seen.
I saw a little bit of it. It was weird, by the way.
Yeah, that's a different type of weird. What the point of the movie was this story of this young man who started after going to World War I and seeing all the carnage there. He had a little bit of PTSD, and he started questioning life and everything about it and everything. So he goes to India in search of the truth or whatever, what have you, because he's not finding it in what you consider the civilized world, right, in America. And so he goes on this search and goes and reaches these wise man up on the side of a mountain, and he says, well, you got to go further up the mountain and really spend some time alone after you've studied with me. You got to go out there and you just need to cut yourself off from everything. So he does that, and then he has this realization, and he comes back to him. He says, I see it, I get it, I get the point. He says, okay, now you got to go back out into the world. And it's the value isn't even in all the great things that we're focusing on. The biggest value is in the conflict.
Yes.
The value is in the conflict of interactive relationships with other humans that are all so screwed up.
Right.
And even if you're not screwed up, you're going to be affected by being around people who are, and that's what you need. It's the gravity to building muscle with weights. It's everything in life. All improvement is based off of conflict. And so you have to be out there in it, and it has to be with imperfect people.
I just realized how exactly right. I just realized how some of this comes about. A lot of us, I know me, was a loner. We tend to be, and see, if you see the world as it is, as a kid, you have a tendency to kind of recoil a little bit and maybe get away from it. And there you are right there. Then you start building a life separate from the craziness. You think it's separate. A lot of the craziness gets into you, of course, but you kind of see a separation there, and you start building the separate society, or it starts with the separation of you and the rest of the world. I know I've done that. You guys could probably relate to the same thing, at least to some degree. David?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes. And I'd like to just make a little more comment on The Razor's Edge. I'd like to encourage you to watch the 1980s version of it. If you can just sort of not, it might be more difficult if I mention this, if you could sort of kind of like push comedian away from Bill Murray and just sort of see him as the character in this, maybe you could let yourself get more of the effect. But the center of the movie is where he's out of this monastery in Tibet, and the Lama tells him to go to this retreat in this isolated area further up the mountain and just be there. And he brings a bunch of books with him, And then he sees this magnificent view, and he's out there for maybe a couple of weeks out in the snow with a few supplies. And he puts the books down and just sort of soaks in the view and experiences the present moment
Yeah.
without having to be distracted from it.
Mm.
And then he goes back to the monastery, and now it's time for him to go back down. And they say, yes, indeed, it is an easy thing to be a holy man on top of a mountain.
Yes.
That's good.
But the idea was, it's time now to go back down from the mountain. And this actually goes back historically. If you go back to the Zoroastrian religion, I think it was Zarathustra, Zoroaster, there was a time when he had to go back down from the mountain into society. And the idea is we have to go back and deal with it.
Yes.
We've been in an incubator where we get some coaching, we get some things resolved, and then it's time to graduate back into the world and put it into action and get the bruises and grow from them.
As Brian said, no working with society, no muscle growth, basically.
Yeah,
you can't grow the muscle without the character muscle or whatever you have. You can't grow it any other way. And I've seen that when I've pulled back too much or gotten too much out of the working daily world kind of thing. You go back into environment and you can't work within it properly. You're kind of like very rusty. It took me a while to kind of work with like coworkers again when I was kind of out of an office environment. It's very interesting. You brought up another great point, David, distractions. And a friend of mine, I interviewed a gentleman who's very successful entrepreneur. And that was a last podcast that I did. David, you saw that as well. And a very successful man in Florida. And one of the things he talks about a lot is distractions. And because now we have the modern world where a lot of we're not only kind of isolated in a certain way, but then we're kind of connected in an artificial way. And then we're given all sorts of distractions in front of us, things that we're somewhat interested in, but they're not necessarily going to move the ball in our world, in our working life or even other lives. It's not really moving the ball in the proper way. So do you guys have ways that you might offer that might help people, or are you just going to say, hey, don't get distracted? Are there things that you've gone through that you've maybe found that are helpful in keeping people on point?
Yeah, what you do is you hire a Catholic nun with a yardstick.
I knew a joke was coming.
Whenever you find yourself surfing the internet for a little too long, or you're distracted with some frivolous information, she hits you over the head with the yardstick and yells out, "Bad, stop."
Yeah, that'll work.
Got to be an app for that.
Yeah, that's right. Got to be an app for that. And they were like that.
To tie it back into the topic in mind, I'd say it's the same thing. You have to have something that you're interested in that can capture your attention to an extent, not to the point to where it pulls you away from yourself, but to the point to where it gives you direction unto itself.
Okay. Can we hold there for a moment? Because before you say the rest of that, I want to see if we can get some congruence here. David, you said earlier that in the old days, they would almost marry you off. They would give you a trade because your father did it or something like that. What is, and we have a more modern view now of, hey, you do things that you maybe are more suited to, that you really like. You marry the woman you actually want to marry.
I do think you want to marry.
Okay. There were some good things in the old days, but perhaps some of those things are a little outdated.
A lot of our modernity is overrated, and we give ourselves too much credit for being wiser than our ancestors.
Okay.
There are some positive points to some of what we have going on now. It is good that people aren't forced into marriages.
Yeah, of course.
It is good that they have some freedom to choose their trades, their professions. But I have to say, easily 95% of the time, people's discretion is poor, They basically go for the spouse that looks physically attractive. Hormones are making the decision as opposed to the wisdom of elders. Beyond that, idiotic considerations like how do I look with this other person in public bears more weight than any kind of seasoned wisdom. People go for flashy careers. Their parents still pressure them to get good grades, so they go for what their parents are pressuring them for, what they believe society is pressuring them for, rather than going for where their aptitudes are. They don't even know where their aptitudes are because they've never developed them. They've been
Well,
taught not.
that's what I wanted to get to. I think if people are raised correctly, whatever that means, right? But I think we have a general idea of what that means. And they are going to be, you talk a lot about Maria Montessori, by the way, the Montessori schools. And I think she was one of those, from what I understand, who would look at kids or children and kind of let them gravitate to the things that they interested in and did well, perhaps. And I think if there was an upbringing that was more sound, I believe that by the time someone becomes 18 years old, whatever it wants, 21, whatever it is, that they are now more ready to get into something that they want to do, that they have aptitude for, and that just kind of fits them like a glove.
Yeah,
But I won't. Yeah, go ahead, Dave.
Yeah,
I'll get right back to you, Brian, because I don't hold what you were going to say, please.
She believed in creating what is called the prepared environment. And the idea is you create an environment loaded with tools, and they could be at different levels. This could be extended all the way into advanced education, although it's almost always just applied to preschool. But the sky's the limit on it. If the parents are doing their job, they provide an environment and they provide unlimited support for whatever the child is interested in, as long as it's wholesome.
Right.
And there isn't a halfway normal child who wouldn't probably know about 5 different trades by the time they're 15 if the parents actually did their job. And there is no such thing as a child who isn't interested in running their own businesses, plural, until they get screwed up by some adults.
Right.
Who mess
That's
their
what it
minds up.
is. You lose your natural boldness, and we've talked about that at times before. You lose that. And another thing is, again, something else we've talked about, but it bears repeating. You think of like a Thomas Jefferson. I always think of him as kind of like a model to some extent, and not perfect. I mean, you could say, well, this guy was given everything. He kind of came into wealth, and it was easy for him to sit back and read all day, and maybe it was. But that idea that people like, I don't know, maybe John Adams, or I think he's the one I'm thinking of, who was quite young and was what do you call that? He was operating on behalf of his country in another country. What do you call that?
An ambassador?
An ambassador. Was that not John Adams? But the point is,
John Quincy Adams.
Okay, maybe it's John Quincy Adams. Yeah, you're right. A brilliant guy, because he got great training from his parents. From his dad really pushed that. How much of that is getting the right kind of training at a young age? I mean, there were brilliant. We've all seen the books that were used in public schools for, 6th graders or something, and none of us could probably read them today very well. So there's a dumbing down that's happened. What's that?
The books were great. They had them reading at the college level by their second year.
Yeah. And Brian, do you remember where you were? Because what do you think about that whole idea of kind of where we leave ourselves? The fact that we don't raise our kids in a way really that brings them to the highest level. Their God-given talent is not brought out. So by the time they get to be of age, a lot of times they're not, ready to kind of take on the world the way they should be.
Well, I think it's the same answer that we have when it comes to wanting to put together tribes. What we're really looking for is systematic change.
Yes.
It's the systems that have failed us. There's morals and everything of the individual people, but that we keep continuing on with systems that we should be questioning. I mean, one of the most common ones, if you tie this all together, is the public school system.
Yes.
And you look at what kind of a whole lot of it that broke apart, at least in the United States, in the public, with people questioning that, and homeschooling became very mainstream. And then you have new systems being built off of that is more closer in relation to, I think, a lot of the original thinking, or at least heading in that direction when it comes to the school system, like David's talking about.
Well, they did have, I believe, public schools were part of what the founding fathers did push. Right?
No, actually, they had
They did not.
I mean, if you call it public was whatever they were doing locally. So to call what you have in the Department of Education
Right.
top down.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's the same.
versus
Right.
versus what's happening there. I mean, with where you had volunteers in it, and oftentimes was not taxpayer funded, but you'd still call it a public school because everybody was involved with it, but it also wasn't compulsory.
Well, maybe it wasn't compulsory.
Not originally in most cases.
That makes sense.
Oh.
And it would more like accurately called community schools, perhaps.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be a more accurate. You see, this is kind of like the use of semantics. The left is sort of hijacked certain words, and they've created other words and phrases to try to misdirect us, like inventing the term capitalism, and also
this, yeah.
and public schools. Okay, the idea of public schools, a place where people are free to come. It's a very different concept than our modern concept, public schools, which means government control, where no one seems to know. The people who control these schools don't seem to have any names or identities that they can be traced to. And all of the schools' charters are basically carbon copies of each other.
Yep.
And
So how do you, I guess I'm just going to jump into, how is that changeable realistically? How are a lot of things changeable when we're talking about tribes? It'd be nice if we had a common tribe of U.S. citizens who kind of believed in a lot of the same things, but we're so far from that. And now that the internet that we're on here has been pretty much taken over by people who are pushing ideologies that do not empower the average person, the average young person, into kind of full flowering of their natural ability. So it's almost like, how do you I guess the question is, how do you compete with that, or can we compete with anything like that?
Sure. I think the first step is to see the systems that aren't working and to back away from them as best as possible. The public school system's it's the easiest one to be able
yes.
to, the government school system's the easiest one to be able to see where you can do that. It's like,
right.
Stop sending your kids there. If you don't like the result, stop doing it. And you have to be able to question the systems and back away. Secondly, you have to know what, at the very least case, know what you don't want as a result, but in the best case, have a and it doesn't matter what type of organization you're looking at putting together, have a very clear understanding of what the end result is. What do you want to achieve with whatever tribe you're looking to put together? And if you don't know exactly what you're looking to achieve, know what you don't want to achieve, know what you want to stay away from. And I'll use this as a segue, if you don't mind, into my story.
Sure.
Because I think David's ideas and where he's going is really the future of everything when it comes to the building of tribes. But what this goes back to 2009. In 2009, we had just come off of an election that had a really dramatic, it felt like an extremely dramatic shift in the U.S. In the politics of the U.S. government. Obama got elected, and along with that, he had a full Democrat Congress, and just the ideas that were being pushed at that time, the associations that were involved in his election, everything else, it caused a lot of turmoil across the country, and it left a lot of people feeling like, oh, now what? What do we do if in the worst case scenario, how are we going to handle this? And so what we did, it was actually via a church. There was a handful of us that got together and said, okay, now what? And I said, well, we don't know exactly how we're going to handle it or how we're going to achieve it, but we need to start talking. Let's get together and start talking about what we'd like to do.
Yes.
Start talking about where we'd like to go. What is our goal? What do we think that we can achieve in a small area with a small group of people with beyond just us surviving individually? What can we do as a unit getting together? And so we got together and just talked once a month. And from that, it grew into what we call the Conservative Action Forum, which is just an idea of, okay, we just want to focus on action items. We don't want to get together and talk you're going to be tied to philosophy, so you'll be in there. Yeah. But we don't want to sit there and just keep rehashing the things that talk radio and everything else is rehashing.
Not a coffee club.
It's not a coffee club. What can we just get together and say, okay, now what? What do we do? What can each of us individually do? What is each person that comes in? What is their issue? And we don't all have to be doing the same things. This person's issue is the Second Amendment. This person's issue is abortion. This person's issue is this or that. And they come in and say, hey, this is what I want to do. What do you guys think? We can talk about what the doing is and be able to fix it. So that's how that group came into being, was not having a clear goal. And then being very specific. Okay, well, we don't want to be this group that everyone belongs to, that you have to have a membership card and you have to pay dues and all that. That wasn't necessary. We said, we're just going to be a meeting place for where everybody can get together regardless. And there's no litmus test. You just come in, say what you think, and be willing to allow other people to say what they think, and have it all be focused in this concept of action. And so that created that idea, but it became a goal from not having a goal.
Yeah. And that's great. It's great. You have to know where to at least start at the basics. The powers that be are threatened by all sorts of things, threatened by any kind of thing that smacks of truthfulness or things that build the United States of America instead of destroying it, are threatening to some of these people. They're there's some demented individuals. And a lot of times some of that is tough to do too, is to get the message out. If you're on a platform like we're on, that can become an issue because they control these platforms. By the way, you can see this video. If you ever don't see it on this platform, you can see it on rumble.com, which hopefully for the near foreseeable future will allow free speech. So that's an issue though, of kind of the threat that they have, and they don't want to. I mean, look at COVID. Look at what was one of the first things that they did. They made sure that the churches don't meet, right? So if they can keep you from meeting, I'm sure they did that with the founders too. They tired them out. They sent them all over the countryside to go to various meetings and pay different fees and things to just tire them out. And that's what they're doing with us. So nevertheless, we do have a lot of power, and especially if we're connected in any way to truth. And just like the founding fathers had power, we have power, but it seems like we have just scratched the surface of the actual power we have. And once we start to turn that power up, it becomes very powerful.
Well, and there's a reason why the freedom of association is in the First Amendment, along with the freedom of speech. The concept, the ability for us to be able to organize in whatever way we want and to associate in any way we want for any reason, it's not available in every country on earth right now.
That's right. And it won't be available here too long either, unless we kind of get our act together, I would say. Anybody paying attention to what's going on in Venezuela right now, they just had an election where the dictator in charge looks like he lost. By all the exit polls, he lost 2-1. And then he just kind of decided to call himself the winner, and then decided to go after his political opponent. Sound familiar? So we're really not that far away. I think the only thing holding us together right now is God, personally.
Mhm.
and there's not a lot holding us together right now. So I think we do need to be aware of those things, and really a lot of this is, I'd say all of this is our own fault. It's the fault of how we started this program out. It's the fault of us not having our stuff together. We have not been whole individuals who believe in God, who follow his guidance, and we should be the ones in charge. Even the Bible talks about, the righteous are in charge or should be in charge, but when things go wrong, everything switches. The book of Deuteronomy talks about this, how everything switches, and now the unrighteous are in charge, and you're kind of like the alien who lives among you is now calling the shots. So I guess this maybe leads me into, where are we going to go from here? What can we do? What do you guys suggest? I know you've already suggested some of these things, but succinctly, what do you suggest that we do moving forward or concentrate on?
Yeah, I would suggest that we get together with like-minded people who we personally know, and preferably people who live in the same area, but not necessarily. But preferably people who live in the same area, because you could physically meet with them and you could physically work with them, like moving materials around and building actual structures, developing products, refining medicines, whatever. Okay. But also people across the country, and hold regular meetings and bring up issues for discussion which are important. And just like Brian was saying, the emphasis is on action, and maybe it has to necessarily be modest actions to begin with.
Yes.
The modest actions, little actions, are the training grounds of much bigger actions. You have to first kind of like pay your dues growing a small garden first before you solve food provisioning problems for your whole community. You have to have a testing ground on some small plot. And the same is true for, how are you going to restructure an economy so people don't starve to death, so they aren't unemployed during a period of crisis, all this. But it starts with just gathering together, meeting, discussing regularly.
Yes, that makes a lot of sense. I think it's a good spot to talk about the freedomcell.org, the Freedom Network that
Right,
David,
the Freedom Cell movement. Yeah.
I've looked into this myself, and there's a lot of things I really like about it. David has definitely really likes them a lot. And I'm going to go ahead and put up a short video that talks about this organization. I think they're quite interesting. So let's see. Here we go.
Welcome to the Freedom Cell Network. Freedom Cells are local peer-to-peer groups of 8 organizing themselves in a decentralized manner with the goal of empowering group members through education, peaceful resistance, and the creation of alternative institutions. Think of it as your activist support network. These local cells of 8 members work together to accomplish goals. Potential goals include skill sharing, growing food, ensuring every group member has storable food, encrypted communication, an emergency plan, as well as learning self-defense methods. Cell members also make themselves available to render mutual aid to their group in whatever form that may come. As individuals form their first group of 8, or their inner cadre, they begin to organize themselves into a web of decentralized cells. These separate cells form a network of groups of 8, which also have the goal of empowering group members through peaceful resistance and creating alternative institutions. Through building and supporting alternative systems, such as local food networks, health services, mutual defense groups, peer-to-peer economies, and communication networks, Freedom Cells will be better able to disconnect themselves from the state institutions they deem unworthy of their support. Once groups become large enough in numbers, it becomes possible for participants to opt out en masse and focus on the creation of new systems. As these individual cells connect and link up with each other around the world, they are forming a parallel network to the mainstream society. This is what we call the Freedom Cell Network. If you want to find like-minded people in your area who are focused on solutions, join the rapidly growing community at freedomcells.org.
Very good. I like a lot of that stuff. They've really put a lot of time and energy into this over a number of years, and David's been telling me about it for a while. Very good stuff. I would add in there as well, and I talked to you about this, David. A person doesn't necessarily have to join a network and look for some other strangers to hook up with if they already have people around them and through the country who are rowing the boat in the same way they are, have the same basic values.
You can form a freedom cell of your own personal friends, people you personally know and maybe have known for years and you feel comfortable working with. And that's actually suggested where to start.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. And it's not that hard to do in terms of when we have people that you're talking about meeting with people, Brian, physically, which is, I think, the best of all. But when you know people around the country, it's quite easy to get on a Zoom call, or Jitsi has a free service. It's what do you call those kind of, it's not through any company. It's
peer to peer.
Yeah, kind of a peer-to-peer thing. And you go to Jitsi, JITSI. I think it's jitsi.org. And they have like a Zoom
open source.
I couldn't think of it. Thank you, Brian. And so you can get to people through all sorts of ways of communication that allow you to get together, talk to each other. You can actually share documents with each other. You want to show it. You got a document on your computer. You want to show the group. You can do kind of presentations and things. It's quite amazing. I think this is one spot where the traditional folks have kind of dropped the ball. Traditional people have a lot of great things to offer, especially on the spiritual side of things and kind of following that which was done before. But there's also, it tends to be a fear a lot of times in older folks that when they see computers, it's like, well, these are tools of the devil, which obviously computers have been used by the devil, but I think it's not true to say it's merely tools of the devil. They are tools, just like a gun can be used to kill, go up and shoot up people, or it can be used to defend your home. The computer to me is a tool. You need to know what you're doing. You need discipline, but it is a potentially great tool. And through the computer, you can get on these video type calls with people and actually help educate yourself. They're really amazing tools. I know some older people who are very up to date on tools like this, and I know some older people who are scared to death of tools like this and won't get anywhere near them. But I would encourage people in general to use these tools in an intelligent way, and I think we'd be a lot better off.
Yeah, and I have to say, it's up to the younger people in their freedom cell or in their community to see to it, the people who are savvy with these tools, to see to it that everyone else has certain basic literacies in them, and to coach them and make sure they can proficiently use these.
Yeah. That gets back to what Brian's talked about. We all have something to offer. Generally, younger people are a lot more savvy with this stuff because they just simply used it. They've grown up with it. Older people are not, and understandably, they see it, as a tool of evil and thing like that. And it's also a tool of something they don't use. So I would definitely encourage people to. There's places in your community. I mean, Grants Pass area, they have a thing. I believe a computer group that meets, I think, monthly for older folks, right? That kind of teaches them how to get around a computer. Mm-hmm. And every community you are in will have amazing educational opportunities. David's always looking up educational opportunities wherever he is. And there are places you've talked about, David, places where a young person can go, for instance, and actually do hands-on. They can learn how to whatever it is.
There's what are called maker spaces, and maker spaces are part of the freedom movement. They were originally started by computer geeks who were mostly into code and circuits, and they didn't have much in the way of other skills, but they said, we see the public school systems disassembling. They're destroying our industrial base. They're throwing out all the industrial equipment. They're getting rid of the shop classes. We could see the government's tightening the noose on the population, cutting off access to our industrial heritage. Let us band together and bring tools of our own: welders, woodworking equipment, metalworking equipment, plastic working equipment. Let's teach each other. Let's put them under one roof. And these are what you call our maker spaces. This is the maker movement. There's one big maker space in Costa Mesa called the Urban Workshop. There's other maker spaces in other parts I think up in Grants Pass, I think there might even be a makerspace up there. I might have
There is. I don't know if there's one here, but I looked the other day and I found one in a local paper in Talent, of all places. A great name for it in this case, Talent, Oregon, which is kind of a sub area of Medford, which isn't all that far from Grants Pass. So they have also, and they go to different places too, and do that. But the main section they just opened. I think they just opened this recently in Talent, Oregon. So people can look into that too. There's something else that came up that I was thinking about this morning. I was doing some painting, some house painting, and this is something that you don't need anybody for. You don't need to go to a school for this. You don't need the internet for this. You don't need anything for this, but I highly recommend it because I'm discovering this now. And it's called one of the first commandments that God gave us: work by the sweat of your brow. Every person, for their own physical sense in learning how to do things, but even more important than that, for your spiritual and even mental health, God knew what he was doing. I've had many times, anytime I do anything hand and eye related, it helps me work out my spiritual self. It helps calm me down. It helps me ideas bubble out of me. It's unbelievable. And I think maybe people have been doing this all their lives, don't even think about it. But me, I kind of came from a lazy background and not doing a lot of that kind of work. And I did a lot of computer work and things like that over the years, which I'm not knocking. But I think everybody should be doing something physical: gardening, painting, learning, fixing things around your house. You can do it. It's a huge benefit. And I just want to tell people that because it's something that anyone can do at any time. But most of us don't want to do because most of us don't like to work hard. Anyway, before we go, guys, anything that I missed that you want to talk about? We'll probably be dealing with this from time to time, coming back to these things. But if I missed anything of importance or something that you really wanted to say, go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, I'd say, I mean, you can go for a series on how to go about building a tribe.
Yes.
It's not as difficult as your mind would make you think.
Right. Nothing
it does not take much.
Right.
And I think to keep it going, to make it effective, you have to have a very clear understanding of why. Why are we getting together? Why are we taking up each other's time? And what are we trying to accomplish? But that all comes back to the why. And I was thinking one of the best books on this that I really enjoy is called Start With Why by Simon Sineck. It's considered more of a business book.
Yeah.
But I always like taking business concepts and applying it back to whatever. I mean, it doesn't have to do with it. It's not necessarily, you don't have to start an organization about politics. You don't have to start an organization about, survivalism. You don't have to start that. It could be any type of group that you're trying to get together. Have it be something that everyone wants to do. And that comes down to you initially. Why would you want to put your time and effort into something, realizing that everyone's going to put probably less effort into it than you are? I mean, if you're really interested in it, you're going to be leading the way. That's a great book. It's a really easy read and it's a lot of fun. It really puts you in the mindset of, okay, how do I define, how do I clarify why I want to do this? What am I actually looking to accomplish?
Excellent. Start With Why, Simon Sineck. If you want more information from Brian or how to get in touch with him, go to brianjpombo.com. Lots of stuff there, marketing stuff, all sorts of great information. So, and then if you want to get in touch with them, I think there's a contact form there that they can get to. Brian?
Yep. A number of them on that site.
So. Yeah, very, very good. And David, any closing thoughts?
Yeah, I'd say that you don't have to start as elaborately as you might imagine. You can just get together with one other person if you don't want to be dealing with 8 people all at once.
Yeah.
Get together with one other person and maybe target some simple area, some project that you're both interested in, like maybe growing a small garden, you target growing a tiny garden with just a few square feet with maybe one type of plant, rather than a whole big garden, or some other similar project, some type of homeschooling thing, whatever it is, whatever area you're targeting, but keep it real simple and real limited to start out with.
Yeah, great advice. And just like the journey of 1,000 miles, it always starts with the first step. It doesn't start with a great leap into the unknown. It does take a little faith maybe, but not much, just what do they say, mustard seed size. To get in touch with David, you can send him an email if you wish. David's email was David's email address at juno.com. David's email address at juno.com. Also a great way to get in touch with David is through Facebook, because he puts a lot
through Facebook.
You better through there. There you go. That's how you spell his name. You're probably only going to find one David Cracchiolo, because he is an original, by the way.
And I'm holding up a planter with some little squash plants in it. And I'm wearing my my brown clothes, and I have a brown sun hat on.
David, they're not going to miss you. I'm going to put all our information up at once here, because we're going to all go out together, all for one for all tonight. I'm not dumping you guys off this show. We're all going out together. So if you want to know a little bit about what we're doing at Old School, go to oldschoolus.com. Again, natural health, success, and freedom. I've got a ton of blog posts there. It's there. In the future, it could be much more, but it's there now with some posts, a number of posts I've done, and also some podcasts. We're starting up podcasts again, and that's a lot of fun. And it's always great talking to other people, because that's where it's at. We're all limited in certain ways, in a lot of ways, and it's great to bring us together, because that's where the power is. If you need to reach me, just go to info@oldschoolus.com. info@oldschoolus.com. All right, guys. Thank you again for being with me. Thanks to the audience, of course. And if you guys have any comments, just feel free to let them rip. And thank you, Brian. Thank you, David. I think it's a very good start. Brian's already doing a lot of this on his own. So is David. And we're already kind of moving in those directions. So it's great having friends like this who can help us raise all the boats, so to speak. So that's enough for me today. And we will see you on the next show. Bye-bye, everybody.